Yeah, it's just like, you know what? You don't have to tell your story to everybody. You don't always have to be understood, but it might help one person. And that's where you just need to open up to when you feel led, like open up. We don't have to share all our struggles and just go around and say we're not perfect and we've had all these problems. But when it matters and when you feel that it could be a help, just being vulnerable and saying, hey, this is how I got through this, or sometimes you can't say you've gotten through it, but you're going through it. And maybe that's a help to someone.
Welcome back, everyone, to No Experience Acquired. My name is Chase, and I'm here with my co-host,
Steven. It's good to be here. And today we are joined by two very special guests.
Hi, I'm Leona.
And?
I'm Kaitlin.
Kaitlin is back.
I'm back.
So Caitlin's been on before. Leona, this is your first time.
Yeah.
They
How
hope
you
it's
feeling?
not 3 times straight.
I feel like I got invited because I'm Caitlin's friend. Feeling really good.
Guilty by
Honored.
association.
Yeah.
We actually just felt like we had to have Kaitlin on at the same time. You're really the excuse we got
They
to
really
have
want
Leona
Leona,
on.
but
That kind of was it,
yeah, they
actually,
knew I
a
would be
little
mad
bit.
if I wasn't included.
Well,
I'd have too much FOMO.
thanks for
Yeah,
having
that's
us.
what it was. No, it's so awesome to have you guys on. Honestly, when we first started the podcast, one of the very first things we had said was we need to have Kaitlin and Leona on. And now it's happening. And you guys had mentioned that early on, too.
I'm
that you
glad to
guys
hear
wanted
that
to-
because I kind of wondered why you hadn't had us on.
Yeah.
So-
well, you
They were
are.
waiting for season
Yeah.
2.
Yeah, you had Kaitlin, and I was actually pretty jealous.
Yeah, she was super jealous. Actually, I actually didn't tell her. I didn't tell her that I was going to do the podcast because I knew she'd be like wanted to do us about. So I told
I
her
just
afterwards.
felt like I was more qualified and just would have
I
been a
agree.
better guest. And then,
I mean, always.
Well, I guess we'll find out.
yeah,
Yeah, they really set yourself up. There's a lot of expectation.
I just have 5 more years than Kaitlin of experience.
Of age,
Yeah.
and wrinkles.
Yeah.
And knowledge and traumas and all of
Yeah.
the above.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. Already the conversations before, I really wish we would have started recording earlier because, yeah, I think we would have already things started. But I figure we'll make our way back around again.
Yeah, we'll come up with some interesting stuff to talk about. I like how we've spent about 2 hours chatting with each other
I
before
know.
recording. We might have missed all.
I know.
Okay.
We have
Charcuterie
nothing
board
more
and-
to say.
Yeah, we just wanted to say hi and we're back and that's it.
All right, thanks everyone for tuning in.
It's a good time.
I think with you, there's got to be an expectation that it's going to be something exciting, something controversial, and
Me?
yeah.
You as in Kaitlin.
I know. I feel like sometimes when I look back and listen back to my other podcast, I need to like listen and apologize.
Do you really? How often do you listen back to it?
No, actually, I never have listened back. But
Thinking back on it.
thinking back, I don't know. I
It's
just don't want
hard.
people, sometimes when people say they listen to my podcast, I like get a cringe of like, oh man, did I offend you? Like, so like, are you listening? Like, oh, I listened to yours, and I'm like, oh,
It is weird knowing you're being recorded.
yeah.
That's why I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
like to leave voice messages for people
Well, but what
or
if you
even
die?
write letters.
What?
Like,
I just
I love
like to talk
voicemails.
in person because then hopefully they'll forget what I said.
That's why you send audio text messages and stuff.
Well, I
Yeah.
hope that Caitlin
She
deletes all
communicates
her audio
explicitly on
texts.
Snap.
Only special.
Just like disappear.
For those of you who don't know, Caitlin was actually, were you our first guest? Yeah, wasn't she?
No, I think
Ryan?
was our
Ryan was
first
the first
guest.
one?
Yeah.
Okay, so Caitlin was on second then, and she brought the topic of masculinity and chivalry in today's day and age,
Feminist.
feminism, and all that stuff. So we should just dove straight in.
Yeah, I could
really
dive
did.
deep into anything.
So no pressure, but what do you have for us today?
Oh, look up the hottest topic and I can make anything controversial. Pretty much, yeah, I better. See, I got to just be quiet.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned, you think back on the episode we had recorded back then. Sometimes you feel like you have to apologize. But
Yeah.
when we came in for the second part of that, Chase had asked if there was anything we've like kind of changed or if there was anything we kind of heard back and maybe wanted to like correct or whatever. And I don't think either of us had any points
Yeah.
we wanted to like.
I don't think
re-clarify or
Just firmly entrenched in what you believe, huh?
just yeah.
Yeah, moon landing's fake. And
Yep, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. 50-50.
So Leona, our last episode we were talking about the moon landing,
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
and
They filmed that at Sunset Crater, you know.
There we go. There's our answer.
Yeah, right here in Flagstaff.
I actually love that she added a whole new layer to it. It's now they landed here near our home, Sunset Crater. Where'd you
been
hear
there.
this from?
Oh, I've seen it, and
You've
it
seen
looks
the flag.
exactly. They have a picture there. That's where they trained the astronauts. Did you not know this?
It is. They actually did. There's a course out in Cinders, like literally right behind where Old House was, Sister Sue's and all them's house. If you walk back in there, it says that's where the lunar driving course training is.
So
Yeah.
tell me
And now
that
and
you
still
believe in the moon
it's
landing.
real. Chase.
Yes.
All 3 against 1.
Where's
Wait,
Ryan?
do you
Now I'm
believe the moon landing happened, or do you think it's fake?
It
all
happened at Sunset Crater.
No, did
so
they
the
land
moon
on the
landing
moon?
Didn't. The
I
Sunset
mean-
Crater landing.
I don't know. I feel like if they had been to the moon, they would have seen the Earth as flat. And people
square.
still think the Earth is round, so I feel like they haven't actually seen it
That's very true.
from space.
I like that. That's
It's
a
all
good point.
fake. It's all fake.
It's, here we
Is
go again.
Earth real?
Here we go again.
I'm like, are we
Maybe
here?
we're from the moon and we
Are
landed
we?
on Earth and we would just never found a way to get back.
Yeah.
Moon.
You
children of
never
the
know.
moon.
This is just one of our delusions, and someone here is just hallucinating all of this, creating other people. So, which one is it?
Me, most
Who's real?
likely. I don't think any of you guys
Which
are
one is
real.
real?
I have this conversation at least 3 times a week.
With
and you guys
yourself?
haven't been over this week. So I don't know if you're over now or not.
Have you guys ever thought that this is all just your dream? Literally, all you're doing is dreaming.
So that's
and one day
actually-
you'll wake up and have lived this whole life, and it's not actually real.
It's kind of a sign
like
of
that
OCD,
movie
actually.
where
It's like one of the first telltale signs of OCD.
Really?
It is.
thinking
yeah.
everything is not real.
No, just having like weird kind of paranoid thoughts of like, what if this is fake or what if, you know. But that's just like TikTok talking, not a therapist.
Oh,
so.
okay.
But I have had the thought, like, I think I shared this with you. I sometimes think, like, what if I'm like crazy, you know, or not crazy, but like trapped in my own mind, and I'm like in a ward somewhere, and or like I'm actually not like high functioning in society, and I think I am, but everyone's too nice to tell me that, like, you know, that I'm not all there.
It's basically Shutter Island, but for just a normal
Yes,
life.
just for a normal guy. Like, I genuinely think that.
You're actually functioning pretty well for that.
Okay.
She read that off
I
her
think you're
script.
good.
Yeah, I'm like, what if they paid you to say that? I don't know.
She's like, do I read this right now? Do I read this now?
She's like, do I tell him?
Is this?
Do
is
we
this- is this my
euthanize him right
cue?
now? Euthanize? I meant, what is it? What's the term?
Euthanize is to
Yeah.
kill you.
No, I meant to put to sleep, not kill me.
Oh, well, that would be sedate you.
Sedate
Yeah.
me.
Euthanize. That's what Leona's here for. It's like you know how you're going
She's
to put
my
down a
nurse.
dog and everyone like gets the nice last meal. That's what we're doing. We're just coming all to hang out with you.
Except I made I made it for myself.
You're the worst people ever. We made you cook your own last meal.
All right, Leona,
Sorry.
how do you feel now that we're a few minutes into this episode? I know before we started recording, you were a little.
I
I'm gonna
was
call you out.
nervous.
You were a
Yeah.
little nervous.
I just feel like being recorded for everyone to hear.
Just
Kinda
imagine.
nerve-wracking.
Just imagine this, right? Like we had gone to New York last year. Kaitlin, Leona, and myself,
And a few other people.
and a few other people. I just meant we were there at the same time.
When was this? What month?
Clarify that. It wasn't just the
It
three
was a
of
group
us.
of us, but 3 of us were there, the ones that
Yeah.
are in this room, right? And you were going around New York City just talking to everybody
Random
with
people.
like no filter.
My word, you guys.
Yeah, I love talking to people
So
and
just
asking them questions.
imagine you're talking to all those people you met in New York City right now. Imagine
Yeah.
you're listening to this. Maybe you're just checking up on them. You know?
I love people watching, talking, all of that. But it gets me into trouble because we went to the paint store the other day and I started a conversation with someone that would not stop talking.
And then
that
you know
I
what
was
she
not
did?
interested.
She turned her back and she said, I'm sorry. And then she walked away. And I'm like,
Did you really?
I was like, I can't talk to this guy anymore.
So she just left him with you?
yeah.
Because Caitlin's mean enough to be like, okay, we have to go. Not
Yeah,
interested.
Leona starts it, but I'll be the mean one.
You can't tell people that you just don't want to talk to them.
No.
Really?
No, I'm like the world's biggest people pleaser.
Biggest people pleaser.
Liar.
I didn't know that.
Liar.
Whoa.
No, I've been called a liar. I have gotten myself into some very deep lies.
But the Lord is really helping her.
Yeah.
What
Because
is-
You know the sad
What's-
thing is, her lies are just because she's trying to people please. It's not like she's a lie. Like she's not trying to like lie. She's just such a people
Now I'm
pleaser. She'll
wondering
lie.
I would
What
ask
you
you if
lied to me
this.
about.
Yeah, I would ask you if this is true, but I don't know if I can trust you anymore.
I've usually made it right, but I definitely struggle with not saying truthful things
What is?
or trying to make people happy. It's
Okay.
not that it's not truthful, but
Well,
Yeah, you're a people pleaser.
yeah.
That's where we're opposites.
Yeah.
I'm
Karen's
like,
just a people
I'm just
destroyer.
like,
People displeaser.
yeah.
She's like,
But
I hope to
on-
that
displease you.
person's
Yeah.
way too happy today. I got a mission.
Yeah.
gonna ruin their day.
I kind of get that though, because if my old roommates ever listen to this, which I don't think they will, but back when I had roommates, this was quite a few years ago.
Didn't you live with
I-
Ryan and Naomi?
No,
listen to it.
no,
Just
these
kidding.
were like roommates that I met
kidding.
getting into this apartment. They always used to be in the living room, and I would hate having to walk in because I knew they were going to stop me and talk to me for hours. And I would have I'd be coming back from a photo shoot with my backpack on, like my shoes, and they would stop me in my tracks and they would talk, and I didn't know how to get out of it. So I would stand at the doorway that whole time, and I'm not kidding you, I would sometimes stand there up to 3 hours talking.
Oh,
Not
that's
even kidding.
Really sad.
And then finally, I just would slowly start walking more and more, but they were just in the middle of this story. So then I would just stand by my bedroom door for another while, like another
Yeah.
40 minutes.
I feel you.
It's horrible. So when I would leave my bedroom, I would fake a phone call. And I would talk on the phone, oh, hey. And then I would just wave at them while I was
Oh my
walking out the
goodness.
door.
I saw this funniest video of this lady. She's like, watch my mom try to get off the phone. And she goes outside and rings her own doorbell. And she's like, hey, someone's at the door. And I was like, that is genius. I'm going to use it.
I've seen that. That's hilarious.
But you and I have the same birthdays.
We do.
We're both Libras.
Here we go.
Jinx.
Here we go.
In we go.
And that's actually one of my worst qualities is the people pleasing.
Yeah.
And I feel like this
And maybe some
sounds
of the
so vain, but so
We're the
many
best.
people think I'm really nice. Is this not true? But I'm actually not because I get so stressed out and then I'll lie and I'll be nice to people up front, but behind their back.
No,
I'm
that's
kind of
not true.
Yeah,
You were nice behind their back too. You were nice to their face and nice to them. You just get so stressed out because you so want to make sure they're okay and you want to help and you want to do this. Yeah, she's really nice.
I want to start saying no more. So it's ironic.
She told me that last year too. That was her New Year's resolution for
my
2022.
Resolution for
23,
every year.
24.
That actually terrifies me.
Saying no?
It's a terrible a feeling when talking with Steven. I hate to imagine that he's telling me to be nice, and I would much rather just hear the truth.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I've lied to you
I
quite
would.
a lot. in my
Yeah,
life.
I bet.
I'm just kidding. I've never lied to you in that sense.
No, I would much rather someone just be straight up and honest and do that and then let it go, because I would feel terrible if they were doing it just to be nice to me,
Yeah.
and I'm making them miserable.
well,
for some
I
reason.
know for myself that I care about things more than I know other people even care about. So it's I'm going out of my way to be nice when they don't even care. And that's dumb.
Yeah, it's funny.
You know what I
because-
mean? It's you think that it matters to them, but if you just told them no or were hey, I'm not interested, they wouldn't care.
That's what I think. But then for people like us who say yes to everything our whole lives and then we say the one no, I feel like people would hate us for it.
No.
I feel like we've conditioned people to
To expect yes from us.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a bad thing. I think, yeah.
It's definitely toxic. It can be toxic. I think. Well, and the funny thing is I am such a people pleaser, and for the most part, and I'm super passive in a lot of ways, and then in some ways I'm not. But it's funny because Chase mentions he'd hate to think oh, maybe they're just being nice. But then I also on the flip side would hate to think I am capable of speaking out for myself at times. I'm telling the truth, or if I really don't want to do something,
Yeah,
if
you're
it
pretty
bothers
good
me
about that.
enough, I will say, or I will, I That's what I say. But I think people who know me are probably like, no,
That's why I was so
that's
worried.
not
So
true.
I made him steak and eggs, and he's not a steak person, and he's never had steak and eggs for breakfast. And so I was so nervous the whole time because I was just afraid. And I still am. I still actually don't believe him.
I thought you told me you didn't like it.
There we go.
Is that? I'm just kidding.
I asked Ryan. Before we started the last podcast, I asked Ryan. I was like, okay, just tell me the truth.
Asked
What did he
Ryan,
tell
like
you?
if I just straight up lied to Chase, and I was quite offended.
Chase also is a liar himself, but he's a good
He
liar.
is.
I'm a reformed liar.
Chase is
No.
not a liar now, but he could lie and lie good. Like, yeah.
I've caught Chase in a few lies.
Have you?
I have, but I just never brought him up because I'm a people pleaser.
Oh dear.
What are they?
Oh,
Nothing.
last year.
Were they? Are you just lying now?
No,
He's a nervous
but you're
lad.
turning red.
I am, yeah. Now I'm like, what did I say? What kind of lies were
Andy
these?
Hoots.
I'm really nervous right now.
So I'll tell you one of the lies I got caught in, which is so dumb.
Wait,
But
which story is this?
the one in Florida.
Oh, this is my favorite story,
Oh
guys.
gosh.
I was in somebody's wedding and I went down to Florida, and then like 2 or 3 people, well, we'll say 2. I'm exaggerating. Not that many people wanted to have me over, but so anyways, 2 people wanted to have me over, and I like rushed to this one person's house to have dinner, and then I was going to rush to this other person's house for dessert, and they were supposed to do like hair and all that for the wedding. So I was running late, and I didn't want to tell the first people that I had another appointment, and then I didn't want to tell the second people that I was eating dinner somewhere else. So I was trying to keep this on the DL, the down low. So I'm like rushing over to the second people's house, and I get there and they're like, so have you eaten dinner? And I was like, oh yeah. And they're like, where? And I was like, Taco Bell. And they're like, we don't have a Taco Bell here. And I was like, oh yeah. I was actually out of town, just needed to go on a drive, and they're like, okay. And so I went home. I didn't know them very well.
Oh.
And as soon as I got home, I was like, Caleb, I lied. He's like, oh my gosh, about what? And I was like, I said I went to Taco Bell and I didn't. So I
And
had
they
to
called
call
me out
this
on it.
lady and actually told her. I felt convicted. And I was like, hey, I didn't eat at Taco Bell. She was just like, okay.
She's
Yeah,
like, I don't
it
care.
was so dumb. I don't even know why I lied about it.
That's very honorable
Also,
of you.
Joel pooped on the carpet
On
at
their
the first
carpet?
people's house. Yes.
Wow, you just burned
It
some
was
bridges
really
while you were
stressful. Yeah.
there. Was it the Taco Bell that made him poop?
She's all. That's what she told him.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. The
My
Taco
son
Bell
had
must
Taco
have
Bell.
upset his
They're
stomach.
like, we don't have Taco Bell the first people.
Yeah. So those are the
You
kind
had
of
our
lies
food.
I get caught in.
You're currently having dinner with us. What do you mean you?
Right.
But there's a lot of stories like that are just, it's no need. And the funny thing is, my mom's European. She's very blunt. She will tell you if she doesn't like you, if she can't do something. So I don't know why I am the way I am.
Yeah, that does surprise me. Probably because your mom is just straightforward.
Yeah, I have felt like I've had to like cover for her a lot. You know, when I remember she got invited to a Tupperware party, and it was someone at church, and they're like, "Hey, Louisa, we're having a Tupperware party," and she's like, "I don't like them. It's just church people ripping church people off." And I was like, right next to her, and then she just walked off, and I was like, oh, she doesn't mean that. It's just that we don't use plastic because of the BPA.
They're like, this is
Wow, that was
glassware.
quick.
It's the glass.
But yeah, I feel like I've had to cover for her because I feel like she offends people, but maybe she's just being straightforward and honest. And
You know
she's,
what's another funny trait you mentioning that is you feel the need to have to like make peace on her behalf.
yeah, I'm definitely a mediator.
I feel like your mom never offends me, and I think it's just personalities.
She likes
What
you.
is it? What were we saying? Nurture or
Nature versus nurture.
I feel like if you have the personality to be offended easily, like you're gonna find something to be offended about all the time. But I feel like I'm really hard to offend when I am.
But you
Watch out.
easily offend people.
But I easily offend people. I probably easily
Best of
offend
both
people.
worlds.
I probably easily offend people because I don't feel like a lot offends me.
You know, that's funny you say that though, because
no.
I feel like I am friends with people that are offensive.
That's
She's because she's attracted to her mom.
Am I
She's
offending
getting the
you? I'm
truth out.
sorry. No, it's just that like people in my life, like Caleb, Kaitlin,
All
my
your
mom.
friends are like type A personalities.
Yeah. And I feel like I really feel like no one else could put up with them except for me.
Yeah, you're probably right.
That's why. But yeah, it's interesting. I'm not easily offended, but I do get offended.
I'm sensitive, but I don't know.
So do you feel like you're not easily offended, but you say so? Is it like a miscalculation on level on like what you'll say because you're not offended, so you'll say whatever because you don't think that you'll offend anybody, or do you understand that you will and
No,
say
I don't
it
think
anyways?
I intentionally. I mean, don't get me wrong. There is times when I want to pick a fight, and I'm like, okay, I will pick a fight. But I don't feel like I'm like intentionally like.
are
"Ooh,
there
I'm gonna
times where
offend
you
this."
don't feel like picking a fight? That's
I mean,
the question.
I'm sure when I'm sleeping. I'm sure like when I'm in bed.
Now your dreams are probably.
Actually, my dream last night was fighting with somebody. No, I'm just kidding.
No, she's not.
I just, yeah.
So, is it? Why do you feel like
What's your
there's
problem?
the imbalance? It's not a problem. It's like you. So you say you feel like you say offensive things, or you will offend people. Why do you think that is? Because it bothers her so much. She's so scared that she
To offend
won't. That she
somebody.
will offend somebody. That she'll tell a fabrication to avoid it, and not to be mean or to avoid something, but just to avoid hurting somebody's feeling, which is a good intent.
I just don't like games. Like people play, I feel like people play a lot of games, and it's a lot of. So I'm just like, I'm not trying to offend you, but I'm just like,
I feel like we're gonna have to like make sure this friendship lasts the end of this podcast.
They'll be fine. Whoever's listening might not be.
No, whoever's listening might not be. I just don't like. I'm like just kind of how you said. You don't just say it to my face. Like I can take it, and if I'm offended or I get upset, like I'll work through it. We might not talk for a little bit, but I'll work through it. But I'm like, do not. I just would rather be upfront with somebody because I don't like games. I don't like when people like manipulate the situation or passive aggressive or gaslighting. Those, it drives me crazy. Like I can call my husband out and I laugh about it, but when I see those traits in like my kids and stuff, I panic because I'm like, how do I change this? Because I'm just like, no, don't play games. Just don't be passive aggressive. Like when Mitchell or somebody is just like, oh, like, hey, why didn't you grab the keys? You know, the keys are right here. And or just like, why didn't you start the car? I'm like, why don't you just start the car? Why do we have to say something? I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, yeah.
So, if you could change it a little bit to not make it so offensive, and I don't mean offensive in a bad way, but like less abrasive. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you could? Is there a way you could adjust? Do you wish you would adjust your approach, or does it?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I have a really fast temper. Like I blow so fast and so easy. And I feel like I've learned to control it a little bit around people that like I can't blow on.
I'm just thinking of a certain situation we were both in.
Oh no, which one?
It involved cameras and weddings.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So when
You're quick tempered.
I'm very
Which is so funny
quick-tempered.
because what I did in that situation was I was telling Kaitlin, I was like, just suck it up, just act nice, just pretend nothing's bothering you, right? And
Hey.
that because I was being the mediator.
In that situation, did you actually go to the people you were working for and you're
I
like,
was the
hey,
middleman
she's a little
most of
crazy
that.
right now.
I was the middleman most of that
She's
evening.
Yeah.
not herself.
Yeah.
But then I went back to her and I was kind of like, hey, Kaitlin, you know what? Like, I can't
Yeah.
manipulate your emotions. Like I can't try to tell you to like not feel what you're feeling, especially, with that specific situation. Like it was not that it was justified, but I could see why she was bothered. And I always find myself trying to be that person who's like trying to make the peace or trying to
And honestly,
like clarify everyone's intent,
in that situation, going back to what Chase said, like I should have taken the high road. Like, and my problem is like when I'm like pushed, even when I think I'm playing it cool, like my face, like
the
you
most obvious thing in the
cannot. Yeah, like I'm like
She's walking with you.
I'm
God,
just-
that went well. No.
I'm just like, wow, I did a good job at hiding that. And no, I did not.
Good job, me.
Yeah, that kind of blew up though. And so I think that it probably taught me more of a lesson. I think it did. It in the long run, it hurt me more. That if I could go back, I would definitely fake it till you make it, because, you know, I think honesty is great. And I think that, like, it's obviously so important, but if the situation and the two, you know, the party involved is not, does that make, like, you know, like willing to be on, like, you know, be like,
try to find a middle.
yeah.
like a
Okay.
middle
Yeah.
ground.
Then it can just do you more harm.
So
And
that-
yeah.
To clarify the situation a little bit, so before this, a situation had already happened. There was already an altercation, and then Stephen asked if you'd be able to help with something, correct?
Yeah.
And so you showed up, and that was part of the altercation. So you showed up anyways as a part of it, and there was a lot of emotion still built up behind it. And
And after the,
so then you tried to fake it through the deal, but it's kind of hard to avoid because you were being a photographer for these people.
yeah.
And so at the end of that, you feel like it did more harm. Was it already stuff in there and you just regret what happened then, or did it continue to get worse after that? And that's what you regret, that it continued to roll, or that what happened there was what you regret?
I think that it continued because maybe if I would have just hid my feelings a little more.
Or do you wish you didn't even put yourself in that situation?
That's kind of my fault.
No, I just looking back, like, looking back at what happened, would you say, you know what, I shouldn't have even been there?
No.
Steven's like,
It's just,
no,
it's
I
tricky.
needed-
It's definitely tricky
I
because-
hired her to help me
Well,
shoot.
I'm
right?
also a
And
confrontation avoider, so I probably would have just never talked to them again.
No, like I knew walking into the situation. It wasn't like I went in to help Steven and just kind of was like blindsided. I knew what I was walking into.
we just thought that the other party would also fake it till they make it.
Yeah.
And instead, they were extremely confrontational. Made it very obvious that they did not want us there.
It was like fire and
It
oil.
was like, hey, you're not
and oil.
welcome here, but we didn't hire you, so
Yeah.
unfortunately you have to be here.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, you didn't hire me. Unfortunately, we have to be here because I have a contract.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was just a very awkward situation. So I was like, hey, look, like, I'm sorry, but we're here because someone else hired us and we have to fulfill that. It's a wedding. And, you know, so then, yeah, it adds a kind of a whole nother layer of like, well, should we have not been there? Should we have? And maybe there could have been more conversation. There probably should have been some more more dialogue, I guess, on both sides. But we made it work, right? I think by the end of it, it was a little bit more relaxed, but
Yeah. I should have still I definitely should have done things different because days later it's still yeah. So I don't know. I
you
think
live
that,
and learn.
this probably sounds so vague to any of our listeners. They're like,
yeah,
what are
it's
they
super
talking
vague
about?
and it's all done and over with. And I hope I'm not a grudge holder. So I haven't even thought about it in a long time, but actually when I say that I am very not offended easily, but like the situation that happened, it like really hurt. I don't know if I was offended.
You know,
It really hurt,
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
but it goes into
again,
friendship.
it was kind of not that it was justified, but when someone literally tells you, we don't want you here, we're making it clear we didn't want you here to begin with. That's a pretty natural reaction to have is to be offended or hurt, right?
Yeah.
Now, if they had said something like an off joke or something that was just a little off and you were just sensitive and you got hurt over a small joke, then that's different. But there is obvious, I mean, we're human, right? Like,
So aside from, the being defensive of your friend, and also she's here, so not trying to hurt her feelings or anything, do you feel like the situation, like how do you look at the situation objectively? To me, it sounds a certain way. It probably sounds pretty close to you, but do you feel that she handled fairly well?
and you can be honest. Don't lie to me.
well, I told her early on, I said, Kaitlin, you're being super obvious.
Yeah,
You're
he did.
I did.
He
I
did
went up
come
to
to
her.
me.
I said, Kaitlin, you're being super obvious. And like, it's just worse for everyone now because now everyone's worried because they can tell, right? And Kaitlin was like, what do you want me to do? Just tell me what to do. And I was like, suck it up. Like, just pretend it's not bothering you. Like, let's just be happy. Like, put a smile on your face. And it didn't quite work.
I think I thought I did.
you were like, sure. And then the second you turn around, it was like, your face just dropped. And I was like, oh, poor Kaitlin. But then I felt bad because
It was
not everyone is a people pleaser. Not everyone's like, oh, it's fine. It's okay. You told us we're not allowed to, we shouldn't be here.
We breezed over that, but I'm not worried. Leona's going to get into one altercation. She's going to have one possible confrontation with me, and I'll just never see her again.
No,
Peace.
I will let things go. I actually feel like I'm pretty good at that. And I don't want you to think I'm perfect, but Kaitlin has a lot to learn from me.
that is true.
No, I just do not. I feel like you can sleep on it and you'll be fine the next day. I don't like talking about things with people. I will just let it go and be like, you know what? We don't
But
need
do
to
you
talk about it.
actually let it go?
That's
I
the
mean,
thing.
there's some things I haven't let go. I am a people pleaser and I will kind of
Also
be like
correct.
two-faced. But if you get me upset enough,
I'm going to balance out a little bit because we've had other people do this too, where they're overly critical on themselves.
Yeah.
You're not.
She is.
Leona's not as bad. Like, she's
Not
not,
as bad.
two-faced.
Leona's
She's
like
not here.
she's like a golden retriever in human form.
I'm saying this because I have been called a two-faced liar, which I think is really funny.
Was it the person you told you had Taco Bell?
No.
So you two-faced liar?
No, it's actually family. But and you'll never guess because I have a big family. I have a lot of sister-in-laws. I have 10 sister-in-laws, guys.
Yeah.
Pray for me. Anyways, one of them told me that I was a two-faced. Oh my gosh, two of my sister-in-laws have told me. One told me I was a two-faced liar. One told me God hates liars. So
Maybe she was just stating a fact.
it
She's
was
like,
a fact.
if the shoe fits, I'm dropping this right
Okay,
here.
but anyways, someone told me one time, they were like, oh, Leona's nice until you back her into a corner. So I have blown up at people. And I always have this theory, like, any animal you push into a corner will fight. So if you push me into a corner, I will fight eventually.
All right. That's your nugget of
Okay.
knowledge right there. Anything you back into a corner will
don't
fight.
mess with
I'm just
Leona.
saying I'm a people pleaser, but watch out.
I feel like we just talked
Is
about
it
ourselves.
that, or is it just because you've pent it up for so long that you're more prone to blow up by the time it gets to like an exploding point? You've held it in for so long that you're more prone to like an emotional outburst.
Yeah. Probably the emotional outburst.
It's like,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
yes, that all
It's
the
actually
above.
Those are correct.
Caleb's pet peeve is when he asks me questions, which he asks me 2 at a time, and I just respond with yes to one
And
of them.
Caleb is your husband, in
Yeah.
case people are listening. And,
Yeah. So Caleb, Kaitlin, it's weird.
yeah, you're attracted to these,
C's.
yeah, K's.
C is for chaos, right?
So Chase, are you confrontational? Are you?
Guys, we've already gone over this.
Yeah, go listen to like the first 50 episodes, and they're all praising how Chase is like
Chase
Perfect.
is-
a good character to look up to.
I think we actually edited those out. It was really
There was
good.
one
I'm
I
on
edited
the-
out.
I can
I
pick
think
apart his
I
flaws.
like
Well,
counted.
he's like picking you apart.
I
So I
know.
feel like you should pick him apart a little.
But I think he should pick me apart more. I'm like, yeah, start picking at me so we can get in a fight. This is actually what happens. You guys had a conversation and at my house, and I was like the one egging Chase on.
That is very true.
You know?
So
I'm like,
we
just-
can get into it. Why not? We kind of touched into it on our first episode back this year. So Chase and I had mentioned on our first episode back this year that we were kind of struggling on coming back to the podcast because a lot of different themes had kind of popped up that we didn't know how to deal with. And, you know, we kind of view the world through a Christian lens and a more conservative lens, and just have certain ideologies and convictions and morals, right? And now, obviously, we're 2 different people, so we have differing convictions and morals and differing opinions, right? And I started getting a little bit frozen up. I was like, well, I guess I was a little too black and white, probably, honestly. I was like, well, if we're going to offend everybody, we might as well not do anything, right? Like, because I wanted to be a little bit more unfiltered on this podcast. And we kind of all sat down one night. It was, Kaitlin was there, your husband Mitchell was there, Jason and I were there, Gabby, your wife, was there.
Yeah, she
Poor
was.
Gabby. She was
Poor
trying
thing.
so
She
hard
was
to
like,
like mediate and just be like,
everyone be quiet.
yeah. And then you 2 kind of started getting into it a little bit more heavily, more of a heavier conversation, I guess. And maybe because you're siblings,
Yeah.
there's more freedom to do that. But yeah, talk about that. Like, you guys got kind of heated a little bit there for a minute.
Yeah, I don't know if I get heated.
Did it not?
Did I get heated?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would
you
say
were pretty
got
frustrated.
heated.
I don't feel like I was frustrated. I feel like I get when I'm expressing, it sounds like I am. Gabrielle does the same way.
No, because you get like, you're not necessarily frustrated, but like you get you're annoyed, you're bothered, you're worked up.
It's more because of my inability to communicate what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, you are really bad at that.
Which
It's really
could
good that I'm on a
be
podcast
that
then.
it's that, right? Like,
No,
but
Chase
here's-
is so deep. Like,
let's start there. As far as confrontational goes, I'm not confrontational. I don't have a problem talking to people about difficult topics, but I've got to know that it's going to head somewhere productive, that the other person is acting in good faith, that I actually have something good there behind it too. And I don't have a problem.
This podcast is a failure so far.
Yes. No, here's the thing I've noticed though. It might not be confrontational, but I think you are argumentative.
oh, he's
definitely
very
yes.
argumentative.
And it's not so much about confronting, but I think there's always we kind of talked about this even on Ryan's episode, the last episode, about coming in with his mentality of like, and you talked about it during the moon landing with your mother-in-law, that you just came in right away to try to debunk her, right? Like that was your intention. Like, no, here's the facts. Like, here's this. It becomes an argumentative conversation when you're just trying to prove your point, or when you're trying to, and that's when Ryan came up with that quote that Kaitlin loved so much.
Oh my goodness, guys. I am going to sell sweatshirts because
So
of
funny.
Ryan Long. I'm like, if you guys want to pre-order them, please get in contact with the podcast, follow, subscribe,
Merch.
and this will be merch. Okay.
What's the quote?
The quote is, I'm probably not going to do it exactly right, but I've told Mitchell this quote I don't know how many times.
In the last week.
Yes. I'm like, Ryan said something like, he said, I don't think that you can be right until you have the attitude that you're wrong.
That's pretty good.
It is, I mean, maybe I'm like so, but I just was like,
Chase
oh
is
my
like, but
goodness.
facts.
Yes.
No. There's definitely, I've talked to you about it before. And we've had conversations about how your approach matters.
Yeah.
So
But this is where we disagree. Yeah.
that's fine. So you agree with Ryan, but not me, even though it's the same thing.
No, because I don't want to say that. I think that you're too cautious.
I don't want to say that you're right.
No. Yeah, I don't want to say that you're right. But
Do you
like,
think
I
he's
think
too
that
cautious?
yes, like sometimes he's argumentative, but sometimes I think, and I get, so our argument is if this person cannot take the conversation that we're going to have, then why even talk about it or bring it up? Like because I am like, oh, I don't get easily offended. I can take it. I can talk about it. For me, it might not bother me to like bring up controversial stuff and like kind of get into things. It might not bother me, but it probably might bother other people. But I don't really, he's probably saying that I don't really think about maybe the other person or the situation or what could go down.
The way that I look at it is that you said you can let things go. At least some things you'll hold on to some things, but you can truly let things go, correct?
I think so.
Not everyone can do that.
But okay, I get that. But
So
I'm like,
it's not never, and I agree, I can be cautious. But I look at it as the fact of that not everyone can move forward the same way that I do.
I know. So what, are we just going to like tiptoe around anybody that might get their feelings hurt? Because everybody's going to get their feelings hurt.
No, but it's okay to wait until you have the right approach, until you have the right opportunity.
That's that time that you're saying I did not have a bad approach. Like, I think you thought in my head that I was like,
What time are you talking about?
The time that I brought up, you mean?
oh no.
At the table?
I thought you were talking about the other time.
I think we should just go into
No, that one actually was something
Okay.
completely different.
details.
Yeah.
Yeah,
just
sorry,
figure it out at
guys.
this point.
Dates, exact.
Should we just say who it is, when it was, how it happened?
Yeah, can we just start exposing?
There's the juicy gossip.
There's the juicy
Yes,
gossip portion.
No, so that's
Okay.
I will talk about hard conversations. I have to be in a place where I understand that I'm going to be coming from the best place possible, that I'm giving it the best opportunity to have a good outcome. That's what I care about most, is not at the end of it, and that's what the conversation with Ryan was about, or at least that's from my perspective. If you come at someone just to be right, you're not doing anything good, even if you are right. If you don't actually have something good outcome out with it, as in the person either becomes closer to you or they learn something and take something from it that is useful to them later on, then, and it's only destructive just so you can be right, then there's no reason for me to say it. I don't
agree.
have a reason
No,
to say it.
okay, but I'm not
Oh.
trying to say that I'm like,
Should I not agree?
I'm like,
I'm sorry. I want to be your
BFFs.
friend,
This
not
is gonna be
Chase.
really
I thought
hard.
we were BFFs.
Yeah, we are. We are.
Like,
Okay,
this goes
so-
down to friendship.
Tell me what I've supposed to
I'm
agree with.
always right. I'm
Okay.
always right.
No, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, but
Wow.
I'm not saying that I go into
you
this
are
to
a
be like,
master people pleaser.
I'm right. Sometimes I'm like, hey, let's have a hard, and maybe it is my personality and I can be abrasive and I'm controversial, but I'm like, let's have a hard conversation. Like, let it get uncomfortable.
I'm fine with that. I don't have a problem getting.
Are you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Then why
I'm
do you always
not.
try to stop it?
I
There
think
was-
we should move on to another subject.
So why do we try to stop it now?
This is very surface.
Are you getting nervous?
No, it's okay. You guys are siblings. You do that.
Yeah, we are brother
Steven
and sister,
and I
by
are
the
going
way.
to continue the podcast. You guys can go in the other room.
Yeah.
She's like, can you guys take off?
Little partition
Okay, yeah,
comes
we
out
can
from the
not.
floor.
too.
We won't. We can get into like our topic of friendship and stuff.
I think
No,
that
we're
is
past
good.
that.
Rainbows, unicorns.
I think it's good to talk about things that are hard to talk about. But
Yeah.
I also feel like some things, it's like, why go there?
I agree. I to an extent, but I do feel like to bring any kind of resolution, you need to have. I believe there's good conflict, right? Like I
Yeah.
think you
Yeah.
can work through something to a point to where you come to a resolution and where you guys can either both compromise and maybe you won't change each other's perspective, but at least you've. At least you guys know where you stand. So if anything, maybe there's some understanding, right? Even if
Yeah.
you didn't sway one way or the other or whatever it might be. But yeah, and I guess it's all about like knowing when to approach certain things. So I do get what Chase means by that. Like maybe there's a moment where you're like, this isn't going to be productive in any way, right? We're just going to be telling each other points. No, people might get angry, hurt, or offended. So let's put it off until we can be in a place where we can have something productive out of it. But I do think I'm finding more and more that it's worth speaking up to try to work through something, especially if something's bothering you, right? It's better than holding it in, right? I don't know. Like,
Is
I've
it though?
just had a few instances where I thought I was going to resolve something, and then I went to that person to try and talk it out, and it got worse. So I feel like there's this fear of like kind of ripping the scab off a wound.
Because does that go to friendship in a sense? Like, do you only talk about? Do you know what I mean? Like, I can have those hard conversations. So I only have those conversations where I'm comfortable with people that can be like, okay, Caitlin's crazy. Like, let her talk, but like I can
Well, they got to
handle
find
it.
out sometime.
Well, they already know that. If anybody knows
so
me,
for those,
they know.
for those situations, I actually do. I think that you still should talk about them. If you have something that you can't get over, if you can't let it go, and there's few situations where I can't let something go, but if you do have something and it will bother you, and there's potential for it to turn into something more, if you let something that turns a little bit of anger, something like that, turns into bitterness towards somebody, something like that, go take care of it. And my approach to that is that you go.
She's all,
You,
I gotta go, guys.
she's out the door, y'all.
No, I actually do have experience with this.
Yeah.
I like experienced bitterness, and I had always heard like bitterness is like a root, and it can cause disease and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, sure. But then when I experienced it, I was like, yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Like, I'm going to go to the doctor. They're going to tell me I have cancer. And I'll be like, yeah, because I hate this person. I know. And
if this
I put
person
it-
gave me cancer.
Just
No,
name
it
it.
was
Name
just-
her.
really, I see what you're saying. And it was something I put off for years.
Well, what you do,
And-
even if it's going to get worse, that's what you do is you go in with the best opportunity and know that at the end of it, you're going to do your best to just leave it at that and then be able to walk away from it knowing that even if the other person can't do something about it, even if they won't come to the table,
Yeah.
if they won't, and they'll just want to be
They
still
won't
angry about
apologize.
it, you can walk away from it knowing that you can't do anything more and you have nothing to hold on to because you have given it every shot
Yeah.
to be taken care of.
And that's a process. I
Yes.
mean, so my husband's from a family that they do not sweep anything under the rug. They confront it right there. They argue a lot. It stresses me out. I remember when I first got married, I just felt like, they would argue about the rules of a baseball game. And I'm like, okay, so they're just not going to be friends anymore. And it took me a while to realize that that's normal for them. They love controversy. They love arguing. And that's how my husband is. So when I had this ought against this person, he just kept telling me like, you need to make it right. You need to make it right. And I just was not ready to. So part of me feels like the Bible says, if you remember your brother has an ought against you, leave your sacrifice at the altar and go to him vice versa. If you have someone that you have an odd against. So I know you should take care of it right away, but I feel like you have to be in the right spirit and like
You say you have to have the right approach.
the right attitude, the right approach.
I'm like, what does approach mean? Google that for me.
Basically what you were saying, Chase, like you have to go into it where you confront them, talk to them about your ought, and even if they don't apologize, you've left it. Like you're ready to forgive them.
Yeah.
So this instance where it went on for a couple years, I knew I wasn't ready. Like I knew that I imagined myself like on Judgment Day, Jesus was going to be standing by me and being like, you know, you hurt Leona and you were wrong for that. And I was
I love that image so much.
And
It was not
that's
going
like
where I
He's got his arm
expected.
around her. He's like, that's
like-
my girl.
that's kind of how I like wanted just an apology. I wanted them to be like, you know what, you were right. So when I finally confronted the situation, they did not even remember what all had happened. Like I had let it go on so long and I had to just be like, okay, you know, I accept that they didn't apologize and that I hung on to it. But I feel like you have to go into it already being able to forgive.
Yeah.
You have to have forgiveness like before you even go to them.
It's funny because it's not about forgiveness is like accepting somebody's apology. That's not what
Yeah.
forgiveness is.
You have
It
to
is
have
being able
attitude that
to
you're
let
wrong.
go of it regardless. That is forgiveness. Is being, even if they don't have it let go, is
Yeah.
if you let go of it, that's the forgiveness that you have.
So it's
It's more of a
funny.
you thing.
Yeah, you say let go, and I'm like, I'm so good at letting things go, but that's something I hung on to for years.
Really.
And I just think that was a learning experience for me because that person was not fazed by it at all.
And sometimes, just like sometimes you've probably let things go and someone else has been so bothered by it and you were just like, oh, it was another
Yeah,
Tuesday.
I can't really. I think that I'm like I'm sure I've offended people, but I'm
She
like
can't imagine
really?
why.
How? Yeah, how? But it is weird to think like there's people going around with
Yeah.
oughts against you because of something you said randomly and you don't even know.
Oh gosh, I never even thought of that.
Really?
Now,
Don't
now
tell
I'm
him that
super
because now
paranoid.
he's going to be all, they hate me. They hate me. Does that
There's
person
probably
hate me?
so much I've said and done that I don't even
No,
realize
there probably
offends
isn't
someone.
because you're so nice.
That's not true.
Now, Kaitlin, on the other hand,
Guys,
There's
can you
a
guys
lot of
start
people.
telling me?
All the good stuff about
Tell me one good thing about me?
Yeah, so
No, just
Caitlin,
kidding.
I will say I don't have a full mindset that I'm 100% right on that my approach. That's how I approach things, but I also understand that does not mean that it's the only way to handle things, the only way to do things, and that it's always correct. Caitlin's approach to things, too directly to it, will open up opportunities and things that otherwise wouldn't be there. She can start a conversation, and even if I don't think the approach is right, she started the conversation, and it would have never gotten to a point where an opportunity arose to where then that comes open only because she did it the way she did it. And it wouldn't have happened if it would have been me approaching it. And I do recognize that. That's not that I think that, oh, this is how you should always do things. Letting things go and learning from is moving forward is sometimes finding out that other ways work.
Absolutely. I think that's such a good point because you remind me a lot of my sister in a lot of ways. My sister Naomi, she's kind of a type A. She can be abrasive, and her and I clashed a lot because of that. Because someone might say something that bothers her, and she'll call them out on it, or she'll bring it up, and I'm like, just let it go. Like it's not that big. I'm just like trying to keep the peace. But then I also envy people like you guys because you guys are like defenders and mama bears and like stand up against the bully, and it might be abrasive at times, but sometimes it's needed, right? Like I think there is a time and place where something like that might come to use, or like Chase said, might open up an opportunity. And I think with any characteristic, there's a little bit nature versus nurture thing. Like if you let God steward that, I believe he can use that for good, right? Like he can take those traits that make you abrasive or make you a little bit more outspoken. And if stewarded correctly, I believe that it can make you, I don't know, like he can use that like for somebody's good, right? And I don't know in what way it might manifest, but
I don't know. I think you have to be
like-
so careful though, because I think that sometimes you can get like, oh, I am a defender. I am controversial. I can but
Yeah.
it could get me into a lot of trouble. Like I always say that like my like I said, I'm so fast that I don't even like take a breath to.
You don't process it first.
Like I process it very fast. And I'll just kind of process it as it happens.
Yeah, she understands what she's doing. It's just she's very quick, very sharp, very pointed and direct to the point. And it comes. She doesn't have to think about it. It's just there. So she's always been that way. And sometimes that can
and
cut.
it can hurt.
That
It can hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
It's
I
not
think
good.
all of our personality traits, like God has made us certain ways, given us certain traits, but we can lean into them and go too far with it, or we can also try to temper it. You know, there's that balance of just trying to see what God wants us to be and how he wants us to act, and not like leaning into it like, oh, I am controversial, or I am this way because I was born into this family, but just seeing how God can use it.
Absolutely. And I think being careful to not make it like an identity either,
Yeah.
where you're kind of proud of being, you know, oh, I'm the peacemaker, or I'm this, or I'm the abrasive one, or I'm the, like, you can make it an identity and then you just feed that, right? And I think that can become dangerous also.
Yeah. There was a situation that somebody was like, Kaitlin, you go do this. Kaitlin, you go do this. It wasn't that long ago. And I finally was like, Mitchell is like this, like 3 or 4 things. And I'm just like, I don't always want to be the one because no one else that has the guts to do it. Like, I don't want to have to go. But then I've created it myself, you know.
But then you also don't say no.
And then I don't say no. It's not like I'm like, no, you go talk to him. I'm like, okay, I'll go do it.
You are such a people pleaser, but then you have this side of you that you talk about that can be kind of blunt or abrasive or
Yeah,
quick.
but I really am a people.
But you are a people pleaser, which is so funny.
No.
Are you a
Kaitlin?
people pleaser?
Yeah.
That's the thing. I don't know if she's a people pleaser. Or you just take
When's the
on
last time you
things.
told somebody
She's
no?
just really nice.
It's not about that. That's what I mean. It's not that she's a people. She's not doing it to please people, from what I can tell.
Well, who's
And
she
I could
doing
be
it for?
wrong.
Because she's not happy doing it. Like, you know, it's just not doing it for herself.
She's doing it as unto the Lord.
I do think that is a big part of it. I think she takes on a lot as servitude, as serving others. She feels like that is irresponsibility. I don't. And I'm asking too. Also, I'm saying that's my perspective. We're coming here, and I'm wanting to know what you think.
Yeah, I kind of bitch will be like, you do it to yourself. That's like it always tells me, you do it to yourself, because all you will get, like, I know this whole other conversations of like anxiety and depression, like all of that.
What about those things?
I'm like, I do it, and then Mitchell's just like, well, you create it to be even worse because you put more on you. You do it. You do this yourself. Because then I'll just have like these like overwhelming. But then I'm like, I, as a housewife, I am not a feminist. I can't be a preacher. Leona wishes she could be a preacher. I can't. So sometimes I think like this is my way to serve the
It's
Lord.
a whole can of worms.
We're just like, she's
I
like
know, sorry, I'm
skipping
like,
over cans
I
of
just
worms
went
right now.
from
Just like,
anxiety to
Poor life.
depression to feminist
Women
to
preachers.
women
Wait,
preachers.
which
This is what I do. I drop all these bombs and I'm like, which one do you guys want to step on? Come to me.
No, so from what I've noticed from Kaitlin is she comes across, I don't know harsh. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're the one who does a lot. You're always doing for people. I'm serious. I'm not trying to be nice. And
remember,
like,
she's the people pleaser.
yeah,
Take it with a
no,
grain of
but
salt.
like, sadly
She
enough,
is the one that admitted she was a liar, guys.
I can be all talk and no action sometimes. And that's where I feel like Kaitlin is so different from me. Like, people will think I'm nice, but then I don't follow through. Caitlin's going to do it. Like, if she said she's going to do it, she'll be there. She'll be there yesterday. She's going to follow through. I might have good intentions, but
That
then
is not true.
That's
You're more
absolutely
secretive.
True. Well, I'm not about you, about her. I don't know. I don't know about you. I'll let her decide that. But Kaitlin, that's absolutely true for Kaitlin.
No.
Yeah.
No.
it's okay. Don't be critical of yourself. So anyways, let's talk about our friendship.
Okay.
And-
Actually, that is why our friendship, like, this sounds, and I don't even know if this is going derailing, but I'm like, she's like talking all nice about me, and I could say the same thing about her. Like, we're so much alike in so many ways that she's the same way. Like, she's like, you do so much. I can't believe you're doing that. You're doing so much. And then I'll talk to somebody and be like, oh, well, Leona dropped me off dinner yesterday, and then she watched my kids, and then she cleaned the Airbnb for her mom because her mom's gone, and then she emailed me a gift card for coffee. Like, and then she's like, oh, but Kaitlin, you do so much. But she is everywhere and anywhere Leona is there. Like that is the thing with nurture and trait. Like the McGarry people, if you know a McGarry, there's none like them. Like I'm not even trying to. But
I'm
like,
actually the worst one.
no, the work ethic that your
That's
parents
still
taught
levels
you.
above anybody else, if that's the
Yeah.
case.
I'm like the work ethic and the giving and service that your parents taught you is like almost shameful for everyone else because like that is what you guys are known for.
I've experienced this firsthand from both you guys very recently. That was first week when we got in the house, and it was extremely stressful, extremely difficult, just completely worn down. And both you and your mom brought us dinners, cleaned, stuff like that. I think you brought us multiple dinners. I'm pretty sure we still
She
have
did
a dinner
and watched
dish
my
from you.
kids.
Pretty sure.
You'll never get that
And-
dinner dish back.
That's okay. I'm not the best cook either, so
It was
it's
delicious.
But yeah,
that's
my mom
absolutely
is
true.
like that. She's pretty
You both
abrasive.
are like that.
Well, yeah, I guess. Okay, I brought them dinner, guys.
Twice and watched my kids while I helped. Yeah, don't even get started.
I
this
do
podcast
love-
turning into?
Keep it going.
I do love like helping people, but it stresses me out too sometimes. I mean, I need to learn to say no.
Okay, I'll like talk to her on a Friday, and she'll be like, "I just am so overwhelmed." And then I'm like, "Well, what is going on?" She's like, "Well, we have this family from Europe, and they're staying at our house for 4 months, and then I had to take lunch to Caleb, and then I had to cook dinner, and then I had to clean this Airbnb, but then we have more family coming in, and then and I'm like, and then I had these. She'll be like, "I had this guy that Caleb did work for over for dinner, and his 5 children." I'm like, "You had somebody that Caleb did work for over for dinner with their children?" Yeah. I'm like, okay, I can't even keep up with you. Like, don't
Actually,
even
this is
understand.
nice. All 3 of you guys put me to shame by far in that department. I've had Steven drop off meals along with gift cards for like Grubhub, stuff like that during hard times. Steven has done a ton. So I can very
That's not
easily
true.
say, and this is not just anything, I'm very happy and proud to say that like the people in this room, I'm very fortunate to know and to have examples to me on how to help, to serve, to do those things, because it is.
But I think everybody helps and serves in their own different way. Like, I don't
would
think it
love
has to be
have dinner from you, guys, actually.
I hope
So-
you like
steak and
toast.
eggs.
Steak and eggs, which
They're
were
terrible.
It was the best steak I've ever had.
Because you've never had one.
He doesn't like steak.
I've had steak, but I'm not.
Like
It's
once.
not that I don't like it. I'm just not a big steak guy. I love how much this is derailed. But you cooked me breakfast, and it was the best steak I've had. So, plus there's a lot more.
He's lying to my face.
I'm not lying.
We might need to record this whole.
So I have a
re-record.
question for, especially since you have really dived into this a lot more. Do you feel like it is more nature, or do you feel like it's nurture? Is it something that you've always been, and something that's been inside you to do pretty? I guess naturally is a good way to put it, right? Does it come naturally to you, or is it something that you've had to work on a lot over time?
Maybe we should define nature versus nurture
Yeah.
a little bit before we delve too deep into
So
that.
this is actually is an interesting point. So nature and versus nurture is basically who you are, like how you became who you are. What has
Your
shaped you?
traits.
So is it something intrinsic? Is it something that can be hereditary? It can be behaviors and things from your parents that come through naturally, not necessarily learned. Or is it something that is external to you that has shaped you? Has it been lessons? Has it been people to teach you? Has it been experiences? Has it been things that you've gone through? And that can be nurtured to shape the person through experiences and adjusted what may be done by nature.
And this is good and bad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like good and
That's-
bad traits of your life or who you
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's both. It's
Man,
so
you guys
hard.
cannot even get into this conversation with Leona because Leona could have a whole conversation of
Yeah,
issues.
I think it's so interesting, like that you are the person you are born, character traits that you have, but of course, I mean, the atmosphere that you're in is going to shape you too, and I think it's just going to magnify those things, though, because if you have certain traits,
The nurturing is going to magnify your nature.
yes.
Okay.
So the environment you're in, which I guess is nurture, is going to like accentuate your nature.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like God we're born just certain people with certain characteristics. And I mean, it is DNA And, we believe that he's planned all these things. Your parents got married, their parents got married, like it all plays into that. But I don't want to, I'm very privileged to grow up in a Christian home. We're here in the United States. I feel like I've had a very comfortable life. So I can't say, that hasn't affected me, that I would be who I was, even if I was born in a poor country or was surrounded by violence.
But you've also had a lot of external forces that have probably shaped who you are currently today. Would you say those things only accentuated who you already were, or do you think that there was new traits that developed after going through certain life experiences?
Or traits that were done away with?
Yeah.
Did you lose something, gain something?
That's interesting, because I guess something that makes me really sad is that I've changed a lot. And so I got married when I was 20. And then for anybody who doesn't know, I lost 2 siblings. And when I look back on who I was at 20, it's just like, I don't even know that person. And I guess we're going to go deep. But so I got married at 20, moved to South Carolina. And then when I was 23, my brother passed away. And then several years later, my sister passed away. And I was born and raised in Flagstaff. And when my sister passed away, we decided to move back home. And it's been home for me. I've known everybody here. It's a small town, but I just felt like I had changed so much. Flagstaff had changed while I was gone. And even for my husband, I was like, man, I'm not the person that he married. But because I've gone through it twice, when my brother passed away, I definitely saw that it changed me, and kind of for the worst. I didn't handle it well. I feel like I got really bitter towards other people. I just felt like I didn't handle it right. And then when it happened with my sister, I just felt like I knew how to process it. I didn't feel as bitter towards people. So it's like the same thing happened, but it had a different effect on me.
That is super interesting, because you say the first time around, it almost changed you for the worse. Or that's what you're saying. But the second time around, you would say, obviously it was something horrible, but would you say that there was ways it changed you for the better?
Yeah. I feel like I grew more as a person. And yeah, I just learned, I had learned from the first time and reacted to it differently.
Do you feel like with your sister, like your compassion, like you changed, I don't want to say spiritually, but maybe the way you look at
individuals?
Yeah, individuals changed.
Yeah, because when my brother passed away, I just was so mad at the world. I was mad at anyone who hadn't gone through that. And, people would share their trials with me, and I'm like, okay, but did they die?
Yeah.
And I just, even when we were around like my husband's family, I just was so upset that they didn't appreciate what they had. When they would argue, or I was just like, man, you don't even know what it's like to lose somebody you don't appreciate. And I just was basically mad at anyone who didn't understand me and hadn't gone through what I went through. And it just took me years of realizing everybody's trial is big to them, and just having more compassion for people. And when my sister passed, also, I feel like when something happens to you, you do realize you're not the only one. I don't want to say that. It took me a while to realize, like, hey, you're not the only one. You'll talk to people, and if you listen to them long enough, you'll realize, like, hey, they've been through things too. But I guess just maturity-wise, when my sister passed away, I was able to just be more, I guess the word is empathetic to other people. Because, a lot of people had been sympathetic to me.
Right.
And so bringing Kaitlin into this, so she hasn't been through what I've been through, but she's one of the most empathetic persons that I know, which is kind of weird. I don't know if your husband would agree.
Yeah, probably not.
She does not have any sympathy when he's sick. But for me, in my situation, She was one of the first people that called me. She was the first person that called me after my sister passed away. And she's always remembered like the days that it's been their birthday or the anniversary of their death. And even though she hasn't been through it, I can just sense that like understanding and wanting to understand. And I really admire that. And that's something that I didn't even have for anybody, you know, going through it. So back to nature versus nurture, it doesn't, you know, you can have like a certain characteristic and be able to show certain things without actually having gone through stuff.
So you said you were sad looking at your 20-year-old self, like looking back at that. Why are you sad about that?
I think I just miss her.
Miss the carefree,
I miss
pain-free.
I feel like I was really happy and carefree and easygoing, and people have kind of like expected that from me. And so when I went through what I did go through, I feel like a lot of people didn't understand the change that, you know, I had gone through. And I just miss that person.
So are you happy with the person you are now?
No, Chase, I am not.
Not that I mean that you don't have room to...
So when we moved back here, it was really interesting because I had grown up here and I have lifelong friends, but I know that they knew this old Leona, and that was not me anymore. And it's hard.
But you feel obligated to
I feel
be
like I
that
need to
old
be
Leona.
that person. And, you know, people will be like, oh, you were so fun and you were so funny and happy. And it's like, I want to be that, but I can't. And so I miss that part. But I know that we go through things for a reason, and I hope that I can mature from it and grow. But it's just been a really long process.
It is.
Yeah, naturally so, right? I think, and it's so, like when you're saying that you came back to such a different Flagstaff and it was such a different you, it was in multiple ways, right? You were now moving back home where two siblings weren't anymore. You were now moving back home where you were shaped by those experiences. You were now moving back after being gone years, and then this expectation of people like...
Yeah.
How
And I
do
guess
they
I have that expectation of myself too. Like, when will I be back to normal?
And I think going through those things, it's funny because you look back at, say, your 20-year-old self, and it may have been easier. It may have seemed more carefree or happier. But who you were when you started going through those things, and that you wish you would have adjusted differently, was the person that you were. And now looking at yourself, having gone through those, having been shaped, having been made stronger in these areas and improved in these areas, it may have been easier, but you look at who you are now and realize how much stronger you are, and that you're better off now in the sense that you're able to handle those things. You are stronger in those areas. You are a better person in those areas, better than you ever were at that point.
Yeah.
Right. It may have, you didn't realize it at the time because you'd never been tested in that way. You've never had to exercise those areas in life, but you couldn't handle them then. And now you have been made better.
Do you think it's really that like she couldn't handle them then, or she was just forced to learn how to handle it?
Well, that's what anything is that to grow or to do anything, and I very firmly believe you cannot grow in a comfort zone. You can't grow without strain and pain and hurt. It just doesn't work. And whether it's something as simple as exercising, it's gonna hurt.
We grow.
Yeah, no, you don't.
And here's the thing, right? It's like, obviously, thank the Lord for getting you through that. But also, like, you look back at your young self, it's like, she carried you through that too. Like, that was you. Like, that is you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you obviously carried yourself, not carried yourself, but 'cause the Lord carried you, obviously, but you got yourself through that. And maybe you're not the same, but you can look back and be grateful that whatever version of you it was got you to where you're at today.
Well, I don't like change, but we all need to change. I mean,
Wow, you've been through a lot of change for not liking change.
yeah, I think that I like things to stay the same, and I've changed, and I guess I personally don't enjoy that or like that, but I'm really thankful for a spouse, my husband, Caleb. I know that he sees that in me, you know, like when I'm thinking I'm not the same person, he's like, yes, this is this is you. You know, we didn't know everything you were going to go through. We didn't know how you were going to change, but it's still you. And that's something I struggle seeing in myself. Like that, hey, this is Leona. Like I want to be the old Leona, but I'm like, it's all me.
Yeah, that'd be hard to like reconcile both versions in your own head when someone like your spouse is telling you like, no, like you're still the person that I loved then. You're still that person. And he probably sees like the way you've grown. He probably sees all these new traits that you've taken on, all these attributes that he absolutely loves now because of your experiences on top of you still being who you are, you know?
Yeah, I hope so. I think we all just look back and we're critical of how we've handled things.
And I think we give ourselves too short of a time. Like, I think you think like, oh, like you should be over Jonathan. You should be like, you know what I mean? Like you should be not over, you know what I mean? Like not over him, but I think you think that you should be farther along. But I think this will never, like your grief process can never, maybe I'm speaking like, but like there'll just be this continual change of like, oh, he would have been this age, or this would have been his life. So I think there's new development constantly. And I think that like you personally in the season of life, like you just had a baby and you were like, had this family, like, do we really like in this life that we have, like you go through these circumstances, we go through these trials, like give yourself like, if you could just go and grieve, can you imagine if we were able to just like, you were able to go and deal with your problems secluded or however was the best way possible. Yeah. But you're such a people pleaser, even when you're
grieving.
Like the stories that you told me, like after your sister, like you're still a people pleaser and people put so much pressure on you because you are such a people pleaser of like being okay, like what people put on you.
Yeah.
Like
I definitely wish I'd taken more time, and I look back, but I think we can all look back on like stresses that we've gone through and just wished like, hey, I should have taken a step back and just allowed myself to go through it. And as Christians, I feel like we have this expectation of I should handle this trial with joy and I should just move forward and speak in faith and I'm going to be fine. And we don't like acknowledge when we're not okay or not handling it well, or when we don't have faith or we're feeling really discouraged or depressed. It's like we don't want to admit it. We just want to say, nope, we're good.
And everybody's like, oh, if you do say it, everyone's just like, have faith. You'd have to believe. And of course we believe that, but it's also like we're human.
I don't actually think we're also supposed to just be that way either. I mean, Jesus wept when Lazarus died.
Yeah.
And he grieved and he didn't want to go through what he went through on the cross. He didn't, all those emotions and those pains, those are completely normal. Those are there for a reason. And they're part of the process of growth. Like they facilitate it and push you through a lot of those things. So they're not necessarily bad. You can, just like anything, use them badly. You can push too far one way or let it consume you, or you can, or push it entirely away and not handle it and let it sit there and fester until it does turn into something bad. But if you go through it and you do process it and you take it, those are not good in the way that they're like feel good, but they do help you grow. They are there for a reason. We don't have to avoid them. We should handle them. We should process them. We should go through those things and don't have to shove them aside or always be happy or always be those things. Life does come with difficulties and tragedies, and it hurts.
We should, but I think that's what we're saying is the pressure that I feel like, I don't want to say religion. How do you say it in the nice way? Does that make sense? The pressure of, like, it's like, I know that Jesus wept, and I know that if I just like deep down, I know that he doesn't expect us to. He doesn't expect us to, but I don't want to say the church, but like people. Yeah. I think it's like very easy to be like, oh, you need to have faith. You just need to do this. You need to do that. And it's very easy for like to put that. We have these expectations, these boxes that we have to meet, and we have to check, and we have to like in any, and on all of this. And I think it's very easy to almost like a comparison thing with social media, if that's a weird way to put it, in religion, church, spiritual.
It's like, how are you handling this?
And if you're just like, I'm not okay. It's like, if somebody were to tell me that, in my head, I'd be like, well, we just need to pray. And of course, you know what I mean? Like, I believe that 100%. I do know that the only thing that can help in those situations is the Lord. But it's so easy for us to just be like, well, just have faith,
Yeah.
honey, you'll be fine. Like, just pray about it. But I'm like, no, I'm not okay. Like, are you at home on your knees praying for me? That's what I'm saying, because I don't have the faith to pray or believe for myself. So I need you to.
And that's what I am saying, is that should be how we approach it.
But I'm like, do we?
No,
and I'm speaking for myself.
That
You know what I
pressure
mean? Like,
and those things, and it's hard because you want them so badly to be okay, and so the person is like, they can't tell you anything other than that. And should we? Absolutely. And do they probably go home and pray for you and do that and try and not add to your? And maybe we should. They don't want to add to that and be like, oh well, I'm so sad too, and just let you be sad and be like, oh, okay, just lift yourself up. They're trying to help you up, and well intentioned or not. If you lost your arm or something like that, nobody would ever be like, oh, here, let me help you up. Oh, let me get the other arm. No, they'd be like calling out, like, here, lay down. Let me help you. Let me get this for you. Let me do those things. And that's okay. That is, to go through something and to have that much hurt and pain, it's okay to be that. And we absolutely, Kaitlin, to your point, we should be that. We should be figuring out, how can we support them? What do we need to do? Let's pray. Let's just be there for them. They're going to be hurt. The person is going to be this way for a long time. That growth and that recovery is going to be a long time, years and years and years.
I think forever.
Yeah, it will never, it's a wound, it's a thing, it will be a scar, it will never just be gone. Those things will always be, if you tear a ligament or something like that, you're probably going to feel that for the rest of your life. It will heal, you'll be able to function, but you'll always be reminded when you do something strenuous, or, that weather gets a certain way, that ache and pain is there, that you did go through that.
Yeah.
And you keep going, but it doesn't mean the pain isn't there. It's a part of you now.
Yeah.
But like Stephen's last quote too, Stephen's good quote in the last podcast is like, finding a little bit of compassion, finding just a tiny bit of compassion can give you the mercy that you need for somebody else. Something like that.
That's an original. It's good. No.
What did you actually
You
say?
said something like that. Like, I just was like, you know how true that is? Like, I think if we can
It's
find
about the grace, something
the
about
grace.
Oh,
Oh,
empathy.
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
A
Empathy
little
and
empathy,
grace.
you might be
and
able
like,
to find grace.
yeah. Okay. So
for someone, yeah.
I'm like, that goes back for yourself. I think that sometimes you just have to find that tiny bit of like empathy, or for yourself to be like, it's okay that you're not okay. It's okay that you're not the Leona of 20 years old.
Yeah.
Like, unfortunately, your life circumstances don't allow you to be. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just because you decided like, okay, I'm done being fun and happy. Like, you have trauma, and I know that word is so like easily used, but I think that it's legit. No matter what, like, we're human, and those are real things in our brains, that trauma and
I mean, I want to focus more on that. Like you said, it's, I'm not that person, and this is who I am now. It's okay to be this person and not who I was then. And back to what you were saying about finding empathy, I feel like people could be more sympathetic, empathetic. I don't really know the difference between those two. But also, we need to be more open and not just pretend. Like, pretend that we're strong, pretend that we're handling it. Even to the subject of prayer, it's like, if you want someone to pray for a certain need, you have to be open enough to say, hey, I actually have this really bad thing going on. I have this bad sickness. Like, people need to know what to pray for. And so when you're putting on that front of, hey, I'm so strong, all things work together for good, don't worry about me. I feel like I'm pretty open, but I really, as much as I'm a people pleaser, how I relate to people is when they're really honest with me, like, hey, I'm struggling, and kind of going all over the place. But with my sister, when she passed away, that was just a lot of mind battles, and a lot of people would tell me like, hey, you're so strong. And there would be days when I'm like, yeah, I do believe God allowed it to happen. I'm okay. But there's also times when you're not, and
it catches
and
you
it's like, you almost want to laugh at those people and be like, I am not that strong. Like, I really am not. But you just kind of keep going forward. And I don't think you should always confess negative, but also just if everybody was more open with what they were struggling with, then I think people could be more empathetic too.
kind of like that, like we talked the other night, how we were talking about a specific prayer. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
I am, sometimes I feel like a private person. You could be like, I'm struggling with this thing. I'm struggling with something. Pray for me. And I'm like, okay, Lord, help them. Like, that sounds terrible. But like, if in desperation of like, I need a specific thing, like he says to ask. So why don't we take advantage of it?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
absolutely.
And it's not confessioning like, and of course I think that you have to be careful of who you're talking to. If it is a deep, personal, hard battle that you're going through, then of course I would not just be like, because sometimes if people are like, I have this, I'm struggling with this, I'm going to post it on Facebook. I'm like, I don't know. Are we attention? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
But I do believe in the power of, like the other day, I was just thinking like specific. Like
Yeah.
if I needed help from Leona, I would be like, hey, I need dinner. Like I need help with my kids. Can you pick up the kids? Like a specific thing. I need you to grab milk at the store for me. And she'd be like, okay, I will do that. But why don't we do that with the Lord? Are we being specific enough? Are we too scared to be open and vulnerable and be like, no, I need this, and to tell somebody like, I'm not okay and I need this specific thing. And I don't think it's like, I would never think if Leona was taking advantage of me, if she was just like, I need milk, I'd be like, okay, cool, I'll go grab it from the store.
What do you think stops us from doing that? Obviously, it can be a ton of different things, but is that pride? Is that
Yeah.
ego? Is it just privacy? Is it?
I think it's pride.
I think it's pride, but I think we've gotten so, like, if I'm being totally honest, like I get entitled, like as like, oh, I'm a Christian, like I'm a message believer, I believe I'm bride. That sounds really like, but does that make sense?
And imply
what do
in
you
what
mean?
sense? Like you think
Like,
you don't
I-
have
not
to
that
speak
I-
it to
yeah,
someone because
kind
it
of.
should just come to you without having to ask,
Or
like,
even to the
someone for help.
Lord. I'm just like, I think that we can get so quickly entitled to think I'm better. Like, oh, I'll pray for that person because, ooh, they do need extra prayer. Because I can see what they need extra prayer for. But I'm so entitled to think that I'm any better. You know
we
what I
don't
mean?
need it just as much.
That I
Like,
don't need it just as much, or I don't need to be as specific with the Lord as like, hey, that person needs help with this battle that you can maybe visually see, or maybe you're struggling, but I'm like, I might be able to see if somebody's visual need that I'll be like, ooh, need to pray for them more. But I'm not being specific enough to be like, hey, Stephen, or hey, Lord, like he already knows, but he wants to hear us. So is it like pride, or is it just because we've gotten
Well, it is pride.
so entitled?
That
But
is-
I think
is
that's
that the
part
same
of
thing?
pride.
It is part, and I don't. Yeah, so I think they're both right. I think there's aspects to it. I think another aspect from my perspective and what I see is also, it's a lot. I think it's a lot easier to, when you go through something that you've went through, you have a lot more understanding and empathy of somebody who's dealing with something like that. When people are young, for the most part, they haven't gone through a lot of the things to understand what goes along with that. So they can't be truly empathetic. They can be like, well, why didn't you get up? Because every struggle and trial that they've gone through so far, maybe that's how they've been able to handle, because they haven't gone through something world changing and just crushing yet.
Yeah.
But the further we go on in life, the more we go through, the more things we are responsible for, and that things happen. And in a strange way, we learn more by realizing that we weren't really that strong. We didn't really have that answer. Then you go through something and you're like, oh, that person really does help, because I know what that feeling is now. I didn't know
Yeah.
that before. And so you're like, oh, just get up. You're going to be fine. We'll continue on. When in reality, then a year or two down the road and they go through something, a little bit more time has gone on for that person, and they go through it and they can look back at you and be like, there's no way they could have done that. Now
Yeah.
I understand.
And I think, like, as Christians, you always got to look at, obviously we're looking at our circumstance, but it's like, how could the Lord use my situation for someone down the road, right? If I'm always keeping my needs that eventually turn to testimonies to myself, like, how am I ever going to help someone else? Like,
Yeah.
like, if nobody knows, like, everyone's just going to see you and think you are strong and okay and that you never have issues. Obviously, realistically, I think we know that everyone has issues, but that's kind of selfish on our part when you think
Yeah.
about it. It's like,
That's
great
where I
for
feel like
us,
it
you
is
know?
more pride. It's like we want to maintain this certain appearance, and we're not humble enough to just say, hey, I've really struggled with that. Or I really need prayer because I'm struggling with this certain thing. And we just want to maintain this like facade. And, like Kaitlin was saying, I think we can even have that facade with God because we're not willing to be like, I'm actually questioning your existence. I mean, I never questions God's existence. I believe he is. But I do remember when my sister passed away, it was like the closest thing that I've come to as I've heard it called like a crisis of faith. And I just remember hearing, well, it wasn't when I heard that she passed away, but it was a couple months later. I was standing in my kitchen at my pantry, and I think it was just this like, why? Like, why did this happen? Why would God allow it? I don't understand what's going on. And that's like hard to admit to people. Be like, I was kind of questioning what the purpose was. Why would God do this? Is he a just God? Does he care? And I just remember something deep down where it was like this anchor of God is. That's all I know. Like, God is God. And I don't tell a lot of people about that because it's kind of like, oh, you were questioning God. And, they see me as hopefully a Christian. But, they're just like, oh, you're so strong and you're just holding through it in your faith and you're just accepting it. And, you're saying it was, all things work together. And it's like, how am I going to tell them? Actually, I'm not feeling that way right now. Like it is really hard to be open like that. And I feel like if we were, somebody might just really get burdened and be like, wow, I'm going to pray that God gives you peace or understanding of it. And some of those things we have to work out ourselves, and I feel like, I don't know when it was, but I heard this song called I Choose to Be a Christian or I Choose to Believe. And it just made me realize like, it's just a choice. It's a choice to believe in God. And I know some people have had God prove himself to them. But for me, it just was such a revelation of like, I have to choose to believe. I have to choose to believe that God is in control, even though everything in my mind that's happened makes me question it. It's just a simple choice.
And in that case, it's where you've been stripped away from everything else. And it's that thing inside you that is there, that you just know. There's no other proof. There's nothing that could still prove that it's there, but you just know. And then you accept that for what it is, and you just hold on to that regardless of everything else. And it's not that it makes it all better. Like you're saying, it's not that it does, but that's all it is, and that's all you have. And I think to really build the relationship with God, that's where all of us have to start at some point, when it's just you don't have anything else except for that he's there holding you, and you don't know if everything else is going to be okay or not, but you know that he's there and everything else is gone.
And that's where I hope I can help people. I mean, I'm not in a contact with like a lot of people to help them, but that's where I think when you share what you've been through, and I've always been so blessed. I mean, I've been in church my whole life. I've heard a lot of sermons. There are times that I remember just somebody sharing like, hey, I went through this time. I remember there was somebody that came from Africa, and he started talking about depression, and actually that his wife had been going through it. And he just was so vulnerable to talk about like how he didn't know how to handle her and how she went through this time of depression. And I just was so blessed. It wasn't even that he was giving me like an answer or like a special, this is how you get over it. Like if you're depressed, do this. It was just like him sharing what he had gone through. And it just touched me so much because it's so special when you realize you're not the only one going through it. And so, back to my crises of faith, it's like if somebody came to me and to me, like, hey, I'm questioning God, I feel like it's more helpful for me to say, hey, I've been there. I understand. I don't even know what you would do about that. Just, hang on, like, pray and just wait until the Lord shows himself to you. It's not like I have some formula for, well, this scripture that I just feel like you can't explain. You cannot force somebody to see your point of view, or it has to be a revelation.
Not in that way. Yeah.
And kind of with arguing too, though, it's like, you can't be right if you're not going into it. What did you say earlier?
Quoting Brian.
You have
Long.
to be.
You have to. Until
just
you're
this-
right, you
this
have to.
It's gonna be like playing
I'm like, hold on,
telephone.
hold on.
Kaitlin Wilson, Ryan Long.
It's gonna be like telephone by the end of like the year. It's gonna be like you're
You'd be
never
like,
right and you're never wrong.
right. You're never wrong. Everyone's wrong. Caitlin's right.
We're like quoting
Everyone else is
Brian
wrong.
Long.
You're always right. Ryan Long.
You can't be right until you have an attitude that you're wrong.
Yeah. I don't know how I was going to bring that together, but
I think even though you're saying like you don't have a formula for that, just the simple act of you having gone through that and being present for someone is an immense help. Just like that preacher who came from Africa was a huge help for you. It's not like he gave you some formula or some secret advice. It was like, hey, you're not alone. Like we're getting through this, whether it's together or I've gone through it, and like I'll help you, even if it's just sitting with you.
But it doesn't circle back a little bit of like the vulnerability and how prideful and entitled that we are. Like that, like I look at like say my kids or even these young kids that are 15, 16, 17 years old that maybe we've had the appearance of everyone around them, these adults seem to have it all together. Like you don't really see maybe their trials. And I'm not saying you have to go voice them, but I don't think that we're like maybe talking about it enough with these kids of like life is hard. Like we've been telling our kids lately, like, and it's really sad because we're like, you will be tempted. Like somebody will come up and be like, do you want to try this drug? Do you want to try this alcohol? Like, and that sounds really harsh to tell them. It will happen. But if you do it, does that take away the love of God? Because it's just like mom and dad have been there. A bunch of people, you talk to anybody, they have been there. But like, unless we're vocalizing this to them of this is real, like, are they going to be open to talk about, hey, because then like Chloe's like, Mom, I'm just so scared. Like, I just want to be a Christian my whole life. What if I do something wrong? I'm like, what if I grow up and I'm not a Christian anymore? I'm like, well, what do you think not being a Christian is? But I'm like, once going back to your choice, it's going to have to be your choice of believing that there is a God and that he loves you. Like breaking it down, it's like we make these bad decisions, but we have to make the choice that in just having faith and believing him.
And it goes to Leona's point of that it is a revelation, and that it's a point where it doesn't make sense. There's no logical words that you could put to it that would really explain it, that would convince somebody. You couldn't take that experience and convince someone because of the logic of it.
Yeah,
it would still have to be that personal
It's a
thing.
personal
But my
experience,
question is like, are we being too quiet?
Well, and there's
like hiding things from these kids growing up.
So it's hard because it's nuanced, because you can overshare.
Yeah.
And it's not where you want to harm people, but you can then become a stumbling block, because they do look to you for guidance, and they do look for you to be strong. And if all of a sudden you remove that completely, and we have family members who had that and it knocked them off course, went through hard things, saw people go through hard things.
Name them off. Just kidding.
And went through and knocked them off course.
But,
so it's not that you need to hide, but it's not.
No, but what I'm saying is like, was it vocalized that, was it just like they saw that this person made a mistake, or it knocked, it's an excuse to me, but I'm like, it knocked them. I shouldn't say that. They use it as an excuse. I do believe that it's real in their life, but was it vocalized enough that these situations can arise? These situations will happen.
I think I know what you're saying. It's like
the
first time that you, even for me, you look at these people you really admire in your life, your parents, elders, just people you've admired, and then you look at yourself and you're like, oh, I'm not there yet. I'm not as far as long as they are, because you just think, oh, they haven't gone through anything. And then, you take that to your kids, like you say, the first roadblock they hit or the first trial they go through, are they just going to think, oh, I'm not there yet. I can't do this
to mom and
because
dad?
my parents are perfect or so-and-so's perfect. They've never struggled with this. So I'm a failure.
Yeah. And I do agree. There's a point where you do talk to them, but it's, when do you talk to them? Yeah. When are they ready? And in what setting? And who tells them? Because if everyone just tells them and they're not ready and they don't have any contextual understanding of the situation of how it is and the difficulties that come with it. If you tell a kid that his hero did this thing really bad and you have nothing else to it, and it's not, even if you tell them that they're not perfect, they will never see that person, even if they do deserve, even if they've done all these good things, they're back on track and those things, you can completely ruin the perspective of that person, and that may change the course of their life. Well, if that person can't do it, there's no reason in trying, or something like that.
Well, and I think that's where the conversation has to have some nuance to it. Like, you're not just going to tell them like, hey, the world's, this, just kind of expose them and like tear the veil off and be like, look, it's so ugly, so don't get scared when it happens. It's more, I think, about like, that's where empathy comes in. That's where you teach them like, look, and that's what I point it to God and not the person, right? It's like, if you look up to these people, just know none of them are perfect and none of them are righteous of their own accord. It's like, so when they fall, because we're human and we're all going to stumble, it's like, don't let that shake you, right? Like, you tell them we're not perfect. That's why we need God. That's why we have these things in place. That's why we try to keep conviction and morals and values in our home, because we need that structure. But when we fail, because we're human, don't let it shake you, right?
Like, get back up.
Get back up. And it's not God's fault, right? And I think that's a lot of times when people leave the church, and I was there, it's because it's like, oh, everyone's all messed up. Everyone's just like, it's like, yeah, exactly. Like, that's why we're going, because we can't do it without the Lord.
And that's what I mean. You don't want to explain geometry to a 6-year-old. You don't want to just throw everything on them and expect them to handle it as if someone is in high school or they're in college and they've been prepared and they've gone through things and have more understanding.
And I'm not saying like 6-year-old. I'm more saying like 15, 16, these young kids that are getting older.
Well, even that.
But even like my kids now, like Austin the other day, he's like, Dad, what is cannabis? Like, reading. And you're like, being brutally honest, I don't know if it's right or wrong. It's just like.
Well, and it depends on who you're, it all depends on who they are. Are they ready? Are they individually? It's not like, hey, they hit 11 years old and they're ready for this topic, and this topic. There may be guidelines within that you're like, okay, here. But if I know that Oliver is going to grow and not be ready for certain things that other kids are, that's how it's going to be.
Your kid is going to be like the simple faith. He's just like,
exactly.
Jesus is
There's going to be
bigger
things
than
that
all
are,
things.
Yeah. And so it comes to the individual, and what works for them? How do you bring across the lesson without bringing all of the destruction that could come with it?
I agree to that. But then, this is where we get to argue, okay? Let's argue. I'm like, I agree to that. But I feel like, are you back to, you're being too cautious? Because I'm like, oh, I'm going to wait for the right time. And I get that. I understand that. But if we're going to keep waiting to just make sure that kid can handle it, or we don't want to hurt that superhero, we don't want to do this.
Again, that's misunderstanding, or I'm agreeing with you. I agree that you do have to be able to express these things. You do have to be able to talk to them. I'm not saying you shouldn't.
And don't get scared, people. I'm not going to go and tell your children all about. Come here, sit down. I need to tell you about all my problems.
But that's what I mean, is that it's not even, it is on them and how they're going to understand it. But what you do has an effect and unintended effects. And whether you like it or not, best intentions or not, those unintended effects are going to happen.
Yeah. I think that I think more, going back, I think like, how do you say this? I feel like we've gotten so check the boxes, and I already said that, and worried about what this or that, or careful about telling them these things, that like sometimes you just want to tell these kids that it has to start with Jesus. Like, put everything else aside. Put that problem aside. If you are struggling with something that's an addiction or something, and even if they're young or old or whatever, it's kind of, sometimes I look at it, I'm like, I'm not saying forget it and just do it, but I'm like, put that, like, okay, like, you do that. You smoke cigarettes, you struggle with cigarettes. Like, still get to, like, it has to start with the Lord. It has to start with a relationship with him. But are we so worried about, are we forgetting to tell them? And I'm not trying to be like all like new agey, like Jesus loves you. It's all good. You can do what you want. But it's also like we've gotten so law of like, these kids are like, okay, well, if I do this problem, if I have this struggle, I struggle with this, I struggle with this, I better not talk about it because I'm not allowed to struggle with this. And if somebody does struggle with it, we're going to tell everybody about it.
So let me put it this way.
Am I getting too complicated?
If you tell somebody, a kid is struggling with cigarettes, right? And let's say you've struggled, and I know you haven't, but let's say hypothetically you have, and you go and tell a person that, hey, I struggled with this. I know how hard it is. And that will help that person. There's another person sitting right next to him, and you're like, well, I'll just, tell them to share my testimony here. And you say, I struggle with this. And they struggle with a judgmental spirit. But then that's what I mean, is you may not understand. And you're just like, oh, I'll tell everybody this. I'll tell everybody this. I'll tell what I struggle with here. And there may be a time for it. But what you might do to that person is then put something in them, and it is something that they struggle with that you don't have to deal with. But then they go through life and all of a sudden cannot get past judging you. And it's stuck with them. So I have
to suppress my testimony to make sure that I'm not making somebody else judge me.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
This is what's really cool, though. Just listening to you guys. We as parents and as people, we cannot know everything. We can't know how you would react to something. We can't know, that's such a struggle of being a parent. It's like, do I give them more love or do I correct them more? Should I be hard on them or should I just show them mercy? Every child is different, and it's so hard to know, even with people. You just don't know how they're going to react. But God does know exactly the way we're made up, exactly how we react. And he puts us through the exact trial that will mold us. And as humans, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to do things wrong with our kids. But God does not. So he puts these specific trials on each of us. Someone might struggle with anxiety, and he's like, okay, this will mold them into this person. But the next person, he knows, you know what? You can't even handle that, so I'm not going to give that to you. And it's so beautiful because God, he knows exactly what to do with us. And we as humans just don't know anything, and we don't know how to deal with people. We don't know how to raise our kids. We don't know how to deal with ourselves. And it's just really hard because there's so many facets of a person's personality. And
it's true. Yeah, it is. It's kind of that nature versus nurture, right? It's like you can instill all these traits into them and bring them up in a certain way, but then there's going to be that nurture element of these external forces that might shape them into totally something different.
Yeah. And we take too much responsibility on ourselves as far as feeling like we have control, honestly. Feeling like we have control.
Would you say that to his point about being careful with, if you mentioned cigarettes to one person who could handle it, but the other person might take you as judgmental? Would you apply that in that sense?
Pretty much, once again, whose side are you going to take? Don't forget that I am driving you home.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
What would you say, Stephen?
Again.
I think it's really hard to discern those types of situations. I think a part of me wants to be how is that? How would I know? How is that my responsibility to a degree, right? And this kind of actually goes back to our podcast stuff. There's a certain image we could potentially put out, and I'm like, but that's not, it's
kind of on them.
There is an accountability on our part with how we present ourselves, but then there is a degree where that other person might just be in a place and we can't always control how they might receive things, right? And it's hard because I do think that each applies to different situations. And I could have an interaction with someone who can turn around and be like, Stephen was really rude to me. And I might not have thought that, right? I might have actually been in a good mood, and they might go around feeling hurt or offended and okay, so do I take that on me? Should I have to go make that right? I don't know. People could argue that, right? Because I can't take away their truth. I can't take away that I obviously made them feel some sort of way, even if that wasn't my intention. And so it's hard. I think it's really hard in those kind of situations. And I think there's always been this fear for me growing up, especially watching so I don't have any kids, my sister and my brother-in-law, whose kids are, now 17 and 16 and are kind of through that whole teenage years, and them having to navigate, because I do believe you should teach your kids before the world does. I do think that. I do think you have to get to your kids before someone else teaches them, because, and getting more adult conversation here, like, you bet someone's going to tell them about sex. You bet someone's going to tell them about drugs and alcohol and all these things. And it's like, you can control how you tell them, right? And they might not receive it 100% correctly, but if you don't do it, someone is going to do it. And there's this question of like, well, when? And you kind of try to gauge that person's personality, right? Like with my niece and nephew, it's like, well, they might be able to handle this conversation now. They might not. Do they already know these things? We need to teach them, right? And then there's this fear of like, well, if they don't know about these certain things, am I now planting a seed, right? And you can get really paranoid and caught up in all these like conversations of like when and how. But I think that's when you approach things prayerfully and with like, Lord, like having faith, like I want to teach my kids about this and tell them about the world and the things they might confront. And then it's in the Lord's hands, like, because they're going to go out there and they're going to confront all these evils and all these things and all these temptations. Now, I do think, like to Kaitlin's point, it's hard to like paint a picture of like, hey, everyone has issues, everyone's tempted, because you can cross over to like a wishy-washy territory, right? And you see it. I mean, we've all seen it. We all have those church friends who live that really half life, and they have one foot in and one foot out, and they're okay going out dancing and partying and drinking, and then they're there Sunday morning. And I'm not saying that in a judgmental way, but there are certain convictions and things that we know we must stay away from because they could be a detriment to our spiritual life,
your nature,
to our marriage. Exactly.
or your nurture.
And so when you're not careful, I think you can err to the side of like, it's fine, we're all human, all these things, you're going to be confronted with all these things. And if you're not careful, you'll overfeed that to the point where you live a half life, where you live this sort of wishy-washy life. Then suddenly that you slip more and more, right? If you're not careful, like, oh, it's okay to go out dancing. Your kids, like, people do it. It's a fun time. You'll grow out of it. It's like, you don't know what they might confront, when you let these certain things slip in. So I don't have kids. Obviously, I haven't had to navigate this, but just watching and having been through that as a teenager, it is such a delicate balance. It really is. And I think you just have to pray for wisdom and discernment for each situation.
That's where I think we fail, or I fail. We were talking about this the other day, prayer and praying for specific things. And you can apply that to praying for wisdom on how to handle every specific little detail. And I definitely don't pray for wisdom enough. There's a lot of things that I'm like, oh, I know how to handle that. I kind of know what's right. But just even with dealing with people, praying more for how to handle a certain situation, because it might be different with one person. I might be able to go up to Kaitlin and just hash it out. And then with Stephen, I, need to be more sensitive. So it's like praying and asking God.
Just like, yes.
Just hand him a thing of tissues before you talk to him.
Soul.
And we don't do that enough because we think we're so smart sometimes.
Yeah.
We either think we're smart or we don't want to admit that we don't know.
And that's the point of like
He's
when
like,
you
I'm
when you
gonna
go to
finish this
some,
argument.
I will win this.
He's like,
He's
I
like,
will.
coming back to what I was
I'm
trying
not
to
Back to what
confrontational.
I
I promise.
said. I will be right.
No, but that is to it. And you actually had the answer first is you do the thing that you're going to tell them to do. If you do nothing else and you tell them put Jesus first. But you do that before the conversation that you're going to have with the person who's struggling or with the person who may not be. And because we should be listening always for that thing, is what I have to say for this person, or is it for all these people, or is it for nobody? Is it our choice to tell somebody something, or is it what the Lord has for somebody else? And that's the truth of it, is that it's not that I think, oh, well, we shouldn't tell them this, or it's not that. Leona said, the Lord has a plan and a way for everybody. And if you're the person, and I've had to deal with this in a lot of ways of like, I don't need to be everything for somebody. I may not be able to fully sympathize and empathize. in certain ways. I would love to understand in some ways the anxiety and stuff like that. Not so I would have it, but so I'd be able to do what I wish I could and really get down and have that full understanding of how I could pray for you, of how I could be there or what I would do. Because right now, it probably does sound like, oh man, well, cheer up. Good luck, buddy. And I don't know the path to get out of some of the things that you've dealt with. So I just pray in the only way I know how. But I already know that there are other people who have dealt with things that will be able to pray more in depth and really touch the Lord in the ways that he has those people there for a reason. I'm not there necessarily for that reason. He has people in place, and I need to be okay with that. But I also then need to listen. If I'm going to go and say, hey, cheer up, man, good luck with you. You're going to be fine. Just shove it aside. And all that does is drive you further into it. And like, why can't I do that? If I would have been listening, the Lord would have been saying, hey, just leave him alone for a little bit. I have someone coming to talk to him. And I didn't need to say anything. But I've decided that I needed to try and cheer you up, or I needed to tell you this one thing. And it did exactly because I decided the thing that's what Satan wanted. Unintentionally, best intentions. The Lord already had people there. He didn't need me. He has what you need. And it's not me, whatever it is. If there's something he wants me to tell and has something for you from me, then that's what I say. That's what I do when that time is right. But until I hear from that, if I'm deciding to do those things, most likely, and this is just me, I'm going to mess it up. Me deciding to do things throughout my life has continually messed things up. And so for me, I try and stay quiet a lot. It may not sound like it right now, but that's yeah.
Well, and the other side of that is you don't always have to be understood either.
Mm-hmm.
I have
Next
really,
quote.
So
Next
good.
sweatshirt.
That's so
I'm going to be a
good.
millionaire.
You don't always have to be
Not if you don't
understood.
actually do it.
Yeah, that's
What
so
did you
good.
say?
I need
You
to
don't always have to be understood.
You guys,
don't always need
I
to
need
be
to write these down.
understood.
I have
well,
so many
let her finish.
sweatshirts to
She
make.
might have
Okay,
other
I'm sorry.
nuggets.
But
it's going to be a book, not a sweatshirt.
I don't always need to
there's
be
another
understood,
sweatshirt.
but
No,
let me
I
tell you
think
why I should
people
be.
want to be understood and they want to help. Like Chase, you might feel like you want to be there and help everyone and be everything to everybody. But the other side of that for me is just, I don't have to share my story with everybody. When I first went through the things I'd went through, I just wanted to explain like, hi, I'm Leona and this has happened to me. I lost 2 siblings. And, you might be like, hi, I'm Steven.
Go ahead. What are you
know.
going
I'm
to say?
morbidly obese. They're like, yeah, you didn't have to announce that. We can tell.
But I just realized like not everybody has to understand me. And I want them. I want them to be like, oh, that's why you are the way they are. Or you are. I do have multiple personalities, but
For we are many.
but yeah, it's just like, you know what? You don't have to tell your story to everybody. You don't always have to be understood, but it might help one person. And that's where you just need to open up to when you feel led, like open up. We don't have to share all our struggles and just go around and say we're not perfect and we've had all these problems. But when it matters and when you feel that it could be a help, just being vulnerable and saying, hey, this is how I got through this, or sometimes you can't say you've gotten through it, but you're going through it, and maybe that's a help to someone.
Yeah.
So come back for Leona's preaching next week. We'll be back for our next sermon.
Yeah.